Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another Indie Game Friday, where each week I take a look at an independent role-playing game. This week, let's take a look at a little game called Dungeon Rankers. Developed and published by Dead Fisheye, it was released on Steam on July 23rd, 2018. Now, before I get too far into this one, what little of it there is to get into, of course, I should probably qualify this review with a little background on myself. I've long been interested in dungeon crawlers that offered a sort of PvP-style setup, where individual dungeon crawlers are set forth into a dungeon full of traps and monsters, and must face not only the dungeon, but also each other. While Dungeon Rankers is a far cry from doing exactly that, it simulates a pretty good step in that direction, and I must confess that, as a result, I probably enjoyed it more than it objectively deserves. So keep that in mind as we take a look at this. Dungeon Rankers bills itself as a roguelike RPG with Battle Royale-style gameplay, and that's pretty true. It is a roguelike in that it takes place in a randomly generated dungeon with randomly populated monsters, and although it is a single player, you are competing against AI players rather than other actual players. It does mimic the basic gameplay that you'd expect of the Battle Royale genre. There is no plot to speak of. Basically, you create an avatar by naming them and then selecting from a number of pixelated lo-fi representations, and you are then thrown into a random dungeon with 98 AI-controlled characters, as well as a slew of monsters. The objective is to last until someone, you or another ranker, reaches the 8th level and grabs the flag. When you start a round of Dungeon Rankers, you can choose between one of two game modes, although the second is locked until you finish 5 battles with an overall ranking of better than 90, which is actually harder than it seems, because chances are very good that you won't be around when a battle does wrap up, and being knocked out early does not count as being a part of a full game. The basic game mode, Ranker Royale, is as I described earlier, where you and a slew of AI bots make your way down to the 8th level and capture the flag. The other game mode, Ravager Raid, is a solo mode, mostly, which more resembles old-school roguelikes. In that mode, you journey through a dungeon and go down to level 9 to get the Ravager eggs, sometimes with assistance from AI bots, which you can then use to customize your avatar in a variety of minor ways. Gameplay is very simple and turn-based. When you drop in, you are armed with only a random weapon or nothing at all, and pretty much only have your basic stats. Hit points are self-explanatory, while attack and magic determine how much weapon and spell damage you do. Defense covers physical defense, while barrier seems to cover spell defense. Critical percentage is, of course, your chance to strike a critical hit, while evasion percent is your ability to dodge an attack outright automatically. Finally, there's luck. Now, I'm not sure what luck affects, but it may just be a general adjustment, and it seems good to have. During the game, you pick up a variety of equipment. You have several slots, and each slot has effectively 8 potential types of gear. Weapon covers your physical attack, shield covers a defensive or blocking item, magic covers your one magic attack, headgear covers your helm, cloak your cloak, and accessory whatever rings or other items you might find. Although there's only 8 real possibilities of gear for each slot, as you descend the dungeon, gear drops with various pluses, so you can eventually pick up something like a halberd +1 or a halberd +2 or something similar, which improves the basic efficiency. You can also switch between weapons and spells based on the situation. I know in a number of playthroughs I decided to switch between spells based on who or what I was hunting. You can also pick up a variety of items from the aforementioned permanent gear to various potions, items, and food that can cure you, provide temporary bonuses or effects, or even permanent adjustments, or at least permanent in that particular round, since you'll be returned to your basic stats on further matches. Levels may also include a candelabra that expands your vision radius when you pick it up, and a level map that reveals the level map. Although the game does promise quick action and can be played as such, it is actually turn-based, and the best runs take advantage of that. On your turn, you can move in any one of the 4 cardinal directions. Moving into an opponent's square executes a physical attack. You can also change your gear, which takes 1 turn, wait a turn to recover a random, albeit small, amount of hit points, change your facing, which changing your facing without moving doesn't actually take your turn, and it's mostly to use to aim different spells, And finally, of course, you can cast a spell. Spells do have cooldowns in terms of number of turns, so you can't just spam the same spell over and over again. And that is basically it for combat. It's an extremely simple system, but you're operating under certain restraints. Every randomly generated level is relatively small and contains the aforementioned AI players, monsters, and items, but it also contains a stairway to the next level. Nothing stops you from descending the stairway at any time after you find it, and there's no real requirement to kill the monsters on a certain level unless you want the things that they drop. Every 200 turns, a level is considered closed. Being on a closed level doesn't automatically cause you to lose, but rather unleashes a number of unkillable monsters called Ravagers that chase players inexorably until they either die or descend to the next level. With the crowded nature of each level, especially at first, and the time pressure from the Ravagers, Dungeon Rankers does give a certain feel of a more action-oriented game than it mechanically is. If you manage to survive a round, your overall score is calculated based on a number of variables, with bonuses given for killing 10 or more AI bots, or being the one that actually gets the flag at the end. Now, if you don't survive the round, you get nothing, other than the chance to play again, and another match marked as R rather than W. Now, graphically, Dungeon Rankers uses a lot of very pixelated retro-style graphics that fit well enough together, but probably won't stand out much to people who are getting pretty tired of that aesthetic. Although the title screen doesn't have any music itself, which is a glaring lack if I do say so, every level does have background music that is decent enough, but it seems more suited to some sort of sci-fi FPS or demo scene style thing than this particular dungeon crawler. The sound effects you'll hear in the game do get the job done, giving you enough feedback to identify most events without having to read exactly what happened back in the log. There is some controller support, although the controllers themselves are easy enough that it really shouldn't matter whether you're using keyboard or controller. I do have some issues with it. It can be difficult to make rank when you're first playing, and you're likely not to see the second game mode for some considerable amount of time until you get pretty practiced, and then even then, after you get really lucky. I'm not terribly impressed with the music choices, and when it comes right down to it, the AI can be somewhat brain dead at times, at least for certain bot types, since each AI seems to have a different type. The RNG and where you respawn in can be pretty harsh sometimes. I've had more than a few matches start with an almost instant, near unavoidable kill. Although it's easy enough to just restart thereafter, it's still kind of a pain. Finally, the dungeon layouts aren't great. I could see them being a little bit more complex with better traps and the game actually benefiting from that. But who knows? Still, for how cheap that the game is, and it is relatively inexpensive, it does mimic a free-for-all PvP dungeon experience relatively well. I just wish it actually was multiplayer, but I couldn't begin to imagine how you do that with the turn-based play still intact. Now, I do recommend it as a cheap little time waster, at least if you're a fan of roguelikes, but don't generally have time to devote to a full one. I also feel like, with a bit more polish, Dungeon Rankers could go from just merely decent to really good. Anyway, I will leave it at that. As always, I will leave a link to the store page in the description below. This has been the RPG Crawler with Indie Game Friday, Dungeon Rankers. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you've got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. If you're feeling particularly generous, I do have a Patreon at patreon.com/RPGcrawler that goes towards supporting the channel. Every single dollar helps. Until next time, take care and goodbye.